Something happened in that last week, the week before the shooting.
And then he calls my family pawns in his game. Well, he taught me how to play chess.
Guilty, guilty.
Welcome to an all-new episode of Headline Crime. I'm Susan Hendricks. A plea deal has been reached, which means Bryan Kohberger pled guilty to killing Xana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, Kayla Gonzalez, and Maddie Mogen. It also means he will not face the death penalty. He will not face the jury. He will not have to answer to the families the answer they're all looking for, the why. Can we ever rely on a sociopathic, admitted murderer? Highly doubtful that we can trust anything he says. My guest today is journalist and New York Times bestselling author Howard Blum, and I asked him just that. Would we find the answers we're looking for, and his thoughts on this not going to trial?
I got a notification on the internet that a settlement was in the work, a plea deal was happening, and I thought, this is a hoax. This can't possibly be happening. I was totally blindsided. I was particularly blindsided by the timing of it. I mean, at this point, after 2.5 years as we were approaching trial, the prosecution had everything they wanted. The judge had just thrown out their alternate perpetrator defense. They had tried to introduce 4 names of people who they said actually committed the crime. Their argument was going to be that the knife sheath that was found in Maddie Mogen's sheets, enmeshed in those sheets, that was planted by the actual perpetrators, and Bryan Kohberger was a patsy, and they gave 4 names trying to prove this argument. The judge looked at the evidence they presented, and he said, this isn't evidence. This is scurrilous. These are allegations, not evidence, and he threw it out. And then just before that, a couple of weeks earlier, the judge had looked at the alibi they presented. Kohberger's alibi was that he'd been out stargazing at 4 o'clock in the morning on a cloudy night, staring, freezing at the heavens. And the judge said, this is no alibi. This is not an alibi, and there's no alibi defense you can introduce into the trial. So at this point, the prosecution was in pretty good stead, yet they cut a deal.
For the record, I have a written plea agreement which indicates, in sum, the defendant will plead guilty to all 5 counts in the indictment: burglary, felony, and first-degree murder, 4 counts.
Why they did this? Well, more and more I thought about it, perhaps it wasn't that surprising. You go back to the beginnings of this case. Originally, Judge John Judge, who had the case, he was quick to move it to from Moscow to Boise, get it away from him. And as soon as the case was taken away from him, he could have traveled with it. He could have continued to be the presiding judge on this case, but he had had enough. He retired from the bench. Then there was the police chief in charge, Chief James Fry.
Yeah.
He led
early on, he was tearing up. I remember him.
Right.
Yes.
The families, the University of Idaho, our community, our country, and our officers.
He led the 7-week manhunt. When he announced the arrest of Kohberger, as you said, he was tearing up. And yet, months after that, he retired from the department, and now he's a police chief in Washington State, another state. And then there was even this judge, Judge Hippler. As soon as he went into the courtroom on his first day there, he said, I'd like to say I'm happy to be here, but why start with an untruth?
I know, that was bizarre.
It certainly was, but it's sort of set up things for the plea deal, I think, down the road.
All right. Like to tell you I'm happy to be here, but why start with an untruth?
What? What? Well, that's one way to start, Your Honor.
And the most telling event was the university's decision to demolish the house,
Yes.
the murder house where it occurred.
The house where 4 University of Idaho students were brutally stabbed to death last November has now been demolished. Our Brenda Rodriguez was there as it happened this morning. She joins us live from Moscow with the latest. Brenda, good afternoon. What's the latest there?
Yeah, well, Joe, last time I checked in with you, there was a house, a full house right behind me. Well, as you can see, that's no longer the case, and that's because the demolition started this morning at around 6:30. U of I's Executive Director of Communications, Jody Walker, says that the University of Idaho made the decision after receiving a response in writing form from prosecutors saying that there was, quote, no further need for the house.
They wanted this whole thing just to go away, to be bulldozed over. And I think in the course of this case, we see lots of honorable men making decisions that let's move on. We've had enough of this. And I think Bill Thompson himself, the prosecutor, certainly is an honorable man, but he had spent 2.5 years locked up into this very horrific case. And every prosecutor knows that you go into the courtroom, you're really throwing the dice. You never can tell what's going to happen. There might be one juror who has some measure of reasonable doubt and won't vote guilty, especially in a case where the guilty verdict will take Bryan Kohberger to a firing squad. He will have to face the long guns of a firing squad. That's how the death penalty is enacted in Idaho. So that could have given him some pause. But I think ultimately it goes back to my belief that Thompson, all the other authorities in Idaho just had enough. It was time to move on. 2.5 years of living through this was just enough. And the prospect of a 3-month trial with the verdict in a scintilla of doubt was just too much for them. They lost the appetite for the fight. And I think this is a coolly pragmatic decision, which is an insult to the families, which is an insult to the state taxpayers who've paid more than $4 million up to this point to try to get answers. And we will just never know. The layers of mystery become deeper and deeper.
Yeah. And you bring up so many good points. It almost feels like, and the prosecutors that I have met throughout my career and the courtrooms I've been in, that up until this point, they want the fight. They say, okay, this is inadmissible, not allowed in court. The third party defense out, as you said. They had some wins there. The death penalty, an eye for an eye. I heard Stacy Chapin, Ethan Chapin's mom, say in the newly released documentary, at first we were an eye for an eye. And I do get that, Howard, that there are many families involved in this, and different families, if I've learned anything, mourn differently and heal differently. And to one family, it may have been thought of as a torturous experience, torture for all of them, but not wanting this to go on the day to day, to see the crime scene photos, for everyone to be commenting about it and what have you, the landscape of so many channels out there and so many people and the fight. How much do you think the landscape of media, where we are now, played in? And I heard you say, your book, by the way, was excellent. This is not what you normally write about in the true crime world. And you saw it firsthand. People come at you.
I certainly have. I mean, from writing my thoughts on this case, I received death threats. HarperCollins, the publisher of my book, the editors there received death threats.
Did that play in, I wonder, about this plea deal? I don't know.
I think people had thought this has become such a torrid situation. Enough was enough. It was time to move on. I had the appetite to fight for it, but I was on the periphery of events. But I think the people in Idaho said, we don't want to relive this. And I can sympathize with the families, as you point out. I mean, why should they have to go through this again? The reality is, though, and this breaks my heart, I feel for them, they're going to be going through this every day of their lives.
Every day.
They have their own life sentences. What's also interesting is how the Kohberger team was able to convince Kohberger to ask for a.
You would think he would want the attention.
Right. And I did some reporting on that, and here's what I heard. Several months ago, after the guilty plea was thrown out, and Taylor began to suspect that she's going to have a hard time keeping her client away from the long guns of a firing squad. So she approaches Koberger and says, we have to think about a plea deal. He calls his mother, Marianne Koberger. And at this point, a couple of months ago, she says no. Why she says no? Maybe she believes in her son's innocence. Maybe she doesn't want to confront it. But so there is no plea deal. Ann Taylor keeps on filing motions saying she doesn't have enough discovery, trying to get rid of the death penalty. 13 times she tried to put forth motions involving the death penalty, trying to get it off the table. Yeah. Then last May, Dateline has a 2-hour special, and I was peripherally involved in that. I played a very small part. I did some talking, a little bit of research, but they came up with this really big exclusive that 2 hours after the murders, Brian Koberger at approximately 6 a.m. makes a 54-minute call to a telephone that was registered to Brian Koberger's father in Pennsylvania. What was said, only Brian Koberger and the people at the other end of the line know for sure. I have been told that he spoke largely with his mother, Mary Ann. And now, once the Dateline special came out, the Koberger family realized for the first time, they had certain knowledge that the prosecution knew about this phone call, that they would be called on the stand, that they would have to testify under oath as to what was said in the course of this conversation. And this gave them some pause. And when this was told to Brian, Brian didn't feel what you and I would consider remorse, but on some level, he felt uneasy that after all he had put his parents through, he was now going to put them in legal jeopardy, where they would have to be asked under oath what they said in this phone conversation and what sort of knowledge they might have had, what sort of suspicions might have been building in their minds. And this, plus the fact that he could be spared from the death penalty, that he could live out the rest of his life behind bars, read his books, do his thinking, whatever, that convinced him to tell Ann Taylor, okay, try to get me a plea deal. And to my surprise, she was able to go to the prosecution and get a deal. She saved her client's life.
And you write about the relationship of Koberger with his father and the car ride, saying it felt almost Shakespearean. But did you find out anything about his relationship with his mother, what that was like?
Koberger had a very problematic relationship with both his parents. He would write, and he posted this online as a teenager, how he loved his parents, but at the same time, every time he sees them, he felt a sense of revulsion. He was always going against them. Koberger's father, at one point, when Koberger was a heroin addict as a teenager, Koberger's father had enough after Koberger had stolen his sister's iPhone, and he reports him to the police. The police arrest him for this. And Koberger's father was very concerned, felt a large level of guilt for his son's problems. We can see this in the fact that when Koberger drives out to school in the summer of 2022, he's going from Pennsylvania to Washington State. Koberger's father is going with him for the ride, and is then going to have to take a plane ride home. Well, this is a family that is where finances are tight. The Koberger family has gone bankrupt twice.
And Koberger is a grown man, as I heard you mention, which is
yes,
so true.
He's 28 years old. He's teaching kids, and his father has to accompany him. And the first thing his father does when he's out there, he goes to a neighbor and he says, Christian Martinez, and says, maybe you can look out for my son. He has a hard time making friends. They're very concerned about his son. And then
sounds
again,
like enabling, as we see in some families that have addicts. It sounds like the dad was trying so hard to do whatever he could to make it okay.
Yeah, his father was consumed by guilt and at the same time consumed by anger. And at the same time, it all builds to the trip at Christmas. When he comes out, Brian Koberger, just before Christmas, is going to leave Washington State University for the Christmas break, and he's going to drive home across country. And his father comes out, again, just 5 months from his last cross-country trip at 69 years old, to make this trip with his son. They're sitting shoulder to shoulder for 4 days in a white Hyundai Elantra.
Yeah.
The father knows that every cop in America is looking for a white Hyundai Elantra. There's been a be on the lookout alert sent out for a white Hyundai Elantra. He knows his son lives 9 miles away from where the 4 victims were brutally murdered, and he knows his son is problematic. As soon as he arrives, he sees Brian is in one of his moods. He's tense, he's uptight, and you never know how that's going to end up. And during the course of this ride across America, a ride when they're stopped not once but twice by Indiana State patrolmen, lights flashing to pull over to the side, is for traffic violations. But the father doesn't know, are they arresting my son?
You're coming from Washington State University, and you're going where? Oh.
We're going to be going to Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we're slightly punchy because we're driving for hours.
Hours, days.
Hours to drive.
He's getting, all throughout this journey, he's getting closer and closer to the realization that, oh my gosh, my son's a monster. But at the same time, he can't get there. It's too large a leap to take that he could have fathered a son who killed 4 people. It's interesting, though. I mean, you can't escape destiny. It's the father's DNA that's found on the knife sheath that makes the match to the DNA on the knife sheath button. So in a way, the father winds up pointing the arrow that gets his son spotted by the FBI and then the Moscow task force.
Excellent point. And I know this is speculation, but have you thought about what that conversation may have been like with the mom? Because didn't he take the selfie afterwards based on the timeline?
Exactly. He took the selfie approximately an hour or so after the conversation with the mom, and then he goes first. After the conversation with the mother, he returns to the murder scene. He stands outside the house on King Lane. Then he returns home and takes the selfie. Mission accomplished, in effect. So, what did he and the mother discuss? Boy, I sure would like to know that. That is one of the things that we'll never get any answers to, since there isn't going to be a trial.
My thoughts were maybe he was just, as sick as this sounds, based on what I saw in the selfie, it's chilling, but elation. Maybe he didn't say anything about what he had just done. And they thought, because if you're enabling and if you're tiptoeing around someone, maybe they thought he's in a good mood. Things are going well. I don't know. It's just me guessing.
I think your speculation is sort of on parallel course with mine. I think he exuded a sense of elation that got them scared. They've seen him in sort of these manic upstates, and they know something is off. And then in the days afterwards, when they would read about the murders, I think they began to put 2 and 2 together. They couldn't quite get 4, but they were getting very close.
Do you think they're relieved, the parents, that there was a plea deal? Because didn't the mom say no at first? You reported?
She did say no. I mean, they've saved their son from the firing squad, but I think that's a pretty heavy burden to bear for the rest of your lives, that you've created someone who the whole world knows murdered 4 innocent young children. I mean, I don't think they'll ever feel any kind of relief or anything but guilt and pain. I mean, this is a story where they're only victims. All the survivors are victims forever. The surviving families, both of the people who were murdered and Kohberger's families, they're victims forever.
Absolutely. And when I got to know BTK's daughter, Carrie Rawson, she felt for so many years, and still deep down, she says she does have an inkling of, could I have done something? Could I have known? Feels like, I remember her telling me, we were talking on the phone and we were preparing for a panel with Becky, whose granddaughter was killed in Delphi, Indiana. And she said, they're so nice to me, even though I'm on the other side. And I said, there are no other sides. It's not your fault. They're victims as well. And I saw her the year after, and I felt like that community really helped her. But you're absolutely right. There's so many victims in this. And as I said, they have different ways of healing. I recently watched the documentary that was focused so much on those 4 kids in that house, who they were, and getting to know, lucky enough to get to know Stacy Chapin, and one of Ethan's friends saying something so simplistic, but before he would eat Taco Bell, he would take off all the sauces, peel it off so he didn't have to stop while he was eating. Just the little idiosyncrasies and really feeling like this is what this guy did. If anything, I would think I would want the trial. Maybe. I don't know. I can't pretend to know how they feel. But then again, would he care if Brian Koberger got to know the people that he slaughtered?
Well, we're going to see a bit of that at the sentencing. The families will talk. I always think about Xana Kernodle on her high school graduation, on her mortarboard, on inside the mortarboard, she had written, "For the lives I will change." Think about that. For the lives I will change. And she will never have that opportunity to change other lives. She'll never have the opportunity to grow up into the young woman and then an old woman that she would have been, and to fill a life filled with accomplishments. It's devastating. It's just a horrifically sad case.
Howard, you know what I found really bizarre? It's okay, I understand if a plea deal is reached and that's what they come up with. But the way that it was told, the email to the families, that it felt like, hurry up, this is it. Is so much so that Kelly's father didn't even go inside. He was so furious. And who's to blame him?
Yeah. I mean, it was done in a coolly pragmatic way, without almost a cynical way. Let's get this done over a weekend. Let's not tell the families. I go back again to the demolishment of the murder house, done at 6 o'clock in the morning. You bring the bulldozers in, let's get it over and done with. And they think people will forget. Well, you can't asphalt over these events. This is always going to be in people's minds.
Yeah, the family will never forget. What do you think we'll hear at the sentencing hearing when he sentenced? Anything from him? Or he spoke, we all heard him say yes, 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 in a cold, chilling manner. Do you think we'll hear anything?
I think what we'll hear for sure is from the families. I've been speaking with one of them, and they want to have their say. And they want to be able to look the man who murdered their child in the eyes and tell him what they think and what they feel and the damage he's done. And I think these will be extended statements. I think they'll be heartbreaking. I think it will be just devastating to listen to and deeply affecting. And the greater tragedy is, will it have any effect on Koberger? No. I think it'll be devastating to his parents, but I think he'll go through it. What does Judge Hippler do? That's perhaps even more interesting. He has the right under law to ask Koberger certain questions. He can say something. He could ask, why did you do it? Could you explain the motive? Koberger could say something very terse, another one of his indolent responses, and the judge can say, okay, that's fine, thank you, next question. Or the judge could say, wait a minute, Mr. Koberger, that's not answering my questions. You're not dealing directly with the question I've answered. And he can threaten to throw out even the plea deal if he's not satisfied. However, the likelihood of that occurring is, I think, very, very small. Is the judge affected by any of the reaction that's been in the press, on the podcasts, on various shows against this plea deal? We'll see. That will be revealed in how penetrating his questions are and what he takes from answers from Koberger. But I think it'll be more bulldozing the case. Let's get it over with as quickly as we can. Let the families have their say. Case closed. Move on. Take him to prison. Be gone with him.
Yeah, I often think of Natalie Holloway's mom and how much she wanted answers from Jorn Vandersloot. Just her life dedicated from the moment her daughter never came home from spring break, dedicated to wanting to hear the details, to wanting to hear from him, a sociopathic killer.
It is shocking to hear, of course, but I had to do it. I felt like it was better for me to hear it real time and just brace myself and take the hit, because I had to know.
And that's what sticks with me. Will we ever hear the truth? And we never really, there's never a why that we say, well, that makes sense clearly. But I guess we're trying as a society to understand more. And I wonder if they do get the answers. I already know the answer to that is really no.
No, I mean, to understand the motive in this case, there's probably many motives. First, you have to deal with who was his target. Did they ever have any interaction? There's no record of his ever speaking with her, of his ever following her on social media. It's been said, and I found some support for this, that when she worked as a waitress at the Mad Greek restaurant, he would go there. Perhaps he just saw her. Perhaps that was obsession enough for him to become fixated on her blonde good
Maybe
looks.
he saw Maddie, but there was no real quote unquote rejection.
Right. But her presence, her exuberance was a rejection. I believe, and this we'll never know, that while all these parties were going on at this house that we saw on the body cams that the police released from the noise, somewhere in the shadows, there's Bryan Kohberger. I will always believe, watching all this happen, and you see all these kids having fun, being young, being exuberant, just totally relaxed and in the moment. And here he is, this outsider forever in the shadows, and their lives were a rebuke to the life he was living, and he wanted to punish them for making him feel so insignificant. Because look at what he's done. He starts off as a teenager. He's a heroin addict. He's a morbidly obese. He has visual snow. He can't see the world clearly. It's a psychological condition. And he's a poor student. He somehow finds the strength, the ability, and the discipline to turn his life around. He kicks heroin. How many people have been unable to kick heroin? He's able to kick heroin. He's able to lose 125 pounds of weight. This is before Ozempic. And he's able to lose the weight, turn his body into a fortress by working out. He's then able to get into, from a junior college, a 2-year college, get into DeSales University, and finally Washington State University doctoral program, where he's a teaching assistant. This is, on the surface, a success story. Yet ultimately, biology is destiny. Kohberger can't transcend who he is, and he knows this. It's all building up in him. And when he sees these kids who are living the fully integrated life he'd want to live, who have futures ahead of him, in spite of all he's done, he knows that he is doomed. And I think that's part of his madness.
Absolutely. And you are an accomplished writer, of course, New York Times bestselling author. Is there something, though, when speaking to people and researching this particular horrific crime, is there anything you learned? Is there anything different in you now since you began?
Well, as you said, I've covered a lot of stories. This is my 17th book. I'm an old guy. I've been doing this forever. And, I've done a lot of investigations, but I've never encountered anything where there was such a personal response from readers, both praise and animosity. I mean, in the course of this investigation, I've gotten death threats. This is a case about someone who murdered 4 people. And by my taking a stand or sharing my opinions, people now threaten me and threaten my publisher. To me, that's a level of, I think, madness, anger that I've never encountered before. And maybe it's a sign of the times we're living in, but it seems to be a feverish state, and that this story has provoked a reaction from people. Again, my book was first published a while back, and they're still selling at a fantastic amount. And one level is gratifying, but it's also interesting. People's interest in this case continues to build, and I think it will build even more because they'll still be demanding answers. And I think the only way we're ever going to get complete answers, 10 years from now, Bryan Kohberger is going to be in his jail cell, and he's going to be bored stiff. And he's always wanted to be this forensic psychologist, this criminal justice student. Well, now the noted forensic psychologists of the world are going to come to his jail cell. They're going to sit with him, and Bryan Kohberger is going to feel some justification for telling his story. He's going to feel like he's now achieved this. He's become a peer with them. He's now going to be the authority on his own case, on his own madness, and maybe then a decade from now he'll share something. These kids, that's why, another reason why this case has so affected so many people. It wasn't that just these kids were so good looking, and they certainly were, but they had so much potential, and it was all just ahead of them. And you have to admire, you have to be excited when you see young kids getting ready to step into their futures. I know I've watched it happen with my kids, and it was exciting to see as they go out into the world, find jobs, find spouses, or set up life. And to see these kids deprived of that opportunity is just heartbreaking.
Absolutely. Howard Blum, thank you so much, New York Times bestselling author. And I enjoyed your book and really getting an inside look into what we know so far. Hopefully we find out more.
Yes, I hope we will in the years ahead. But thank you for speaking with me. I enjoyed it.